Good morning, and welcome to the Haventree Parent Podcast, where we get a chance to talk about something that's important to us and to you before our kids wake up.
Today we're talking about homeschooling. We have moved on in the topics, and we're probably going to be talking about homeschooling for a long time because our school year's getting ready to start, and a lot of people are thinking about it this year thanks to Corona.
All right, like she said, we're going to talk about homeschool and just all the ins and outs of what we've learned over the past 5 years of trying different programs and what we've found that works, what we found that we don't like. And I mean, there's a whole slew of stuff that comes along with being homeschooling parents. And like she said, with this whole coronavirus and everybody figuring out if they're choosing homeschool or hybrid school or whatever these new schooling methods are going to be for this 2020 fall, it's going to be a mixed bag for everyone. And we wanted to put some information out there from what we've gained and just our experience.
Well, and I think that, the first thing that's really important to talk about is why we homeschool. Like Josh said, we've been homeschooling for a long time. We're getting ready to go into our 5th year of dedicated curriculum homeschooling. I had done stuff with Adri even prior to that, but it wasn't using a formal curriculum until about that time. So we are entering year 5. And there are a lot of reasons that we chose to homeschool. Some of those have kind of changed and morphed and evolved as our time has progressed. And what we're doing this year is different than what we did last year. And the truth is, I don't think that we've ever done the same thing 2 years in a row. It's always been different and it's always changing, at least in our house. But that's partially because that's what our kids need. For us, I think the biggest reason that we homeschool is because we want to do what's best for our kids. And from the very beginning, we felt like homeschooling was going to be the best option for Adri since she was our first, early on. We wanted to let her learn about things that were interesting to her. We also knew that Adri had a lot of energy when she was 4 and 5 years old, like a lot of energy. And we expected that to kind of change. We expected that would mature a little bit, and it hasn't changed the way that we thought. But that's okay. And it still is the best option for her because we can do a part of a worksheet and then she can go outside and run laps or stand up and do jumping jacks. Adri is a kid that has a lot of energy. And we're not talking about kids never stop. Like Adri's a whole nother level of kids don't stop, or right. A kid that doesn't stop.
Right. But I mean, that's something we love and appreciate about,
absolutely.
Her skills and abilities. I mean, just the amount of energy she has where she's not falling asleep doing her lesson. And, I mean, you don't have that ever. It's more like, okay, can we be done with this so I can move on? And there's the frustration of being fidgety to get out of the space,
and certainly Adri's activity level is such that she probably could have, a label attached to that. It's not something that we've pursued. It is something that I've had a couple of doctors talk to me about. And I think probably if she was in a traditional school setting, it is something that we would have had to pursue and potentially seek some medication for at this point if she was in a traditional school setting. But we are really blessed to be able to do what we do with her and give her different types of skills for coping. And just kind of work at her pace and give her frequent breaks and frequent movement times throughout the day. And that's okay, even though now she's going to go into 3rd grade and you would expect by 3rd grade kids are able to sit. Like I can remember being in 3rd grade. I remember my 3rd grade teacher. I remember we sat desks for a long time in 3rd grade, right? Right. That was part of the day. In kindergarten, 1st grade, you got lots of recess time and things like that. But by 3rd grade, you're midway through elementary school, right? You're kind of expected to start chilling out a little and being able to tend and sit for longer periods of time. And quite frankly, Adri's not there. But that's okay. right now this is what's best for her. And even though early on we didn't expect it to go the way that it has for her, we're also really thankful that we did what we did then and that we're still able to do what we're doing now. And then you look at Sai, who is sort of the like stereotypical brilliant little man, like little old man who's very particular. And his only limit in learning is how long the day is. He loves learning. He's curious. He is so bright. He's very much like a lot of people on my side of the family. I come from a lot of intellectuals, family gatherings for me were like sitting around listening to all my uncles talk about politics and religion, and like these deep theological authors that they'd read and different things like that. And so, a lot of people in my family are very, they love to think, philosophical people, right? And also highly intelligent, in a way that a lot of people would find really dry and boring, probably. But Sai is very much like that. Sai is very particular. Sai is very curious and thoughtful and deep. And he would be really bored in a traditional classroom. On the flip side of that, it wasn't appropriate for us to move him ahead academically, grade-wise, because he wasn't there socially, especially not as a boy. He was, whereas Adri's always been socially extremely intelligent, Sai's like pretty average for a boy, which is,
Right.
like on the bottom probably of like what a typical group of peers might be sometimes.
Sure, he waits to like be included versus like going out to
Right.
people and saying like,
Right.
"Hey, let's play," So
But again, it's a lot of that has to do with just the fact that he's very in his own head, and so he's quite content to be by himself and think, or look at the world, or build or do his own thing and not interact necessarily.
Right.
He really values sort of the intellect, part of his brain, and that process of thinking. So for him, homeschool's been really good because it gives him an opportunity to learn things that excite him and let him really feed that curiosity that he has, while also kind of keeping him on pace in like Sunday school class and in other social activities for what really is appropriate for his age, socially. So, again, for Sai, for very different reasons, homeschooling has given him kind of the best of both worlds. And, it's very funny because I have to be honest, for a long time I thought I was probably doing something wrong with Adri. Adri and I, for like the first 3 years, it was really hard. It's so hard. And, I'm sure that you have lots of memories of like me being like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Like, I don't, I think I'm messing this up, because things didn't go the way that I expected with Adri.
No, I mean, there's definitely times when I'd get home and I'd be like, "Oh man, you're so frustrated. I just want to like undo everything and just send her to school and like let you be done with it and let her
Right.
be done." And just that frustration of trying to figure out why we were, pushing so hard to homeschool. And it was like I knew you wanted to be able to do it, and I knew she would benefit from it as
Right.
soon as she could, start
Make
taking the
those
steps.
connections, yeah.
And it was like, as soon as she can get the steps, we'll be on to a good track. I was like,
Right.
do we sign her up for extracurricular stuff that will
Right.
support that, or like
Right.
online tutoring or something else where she could bump to that next level? And I don't know if it was just, I don't know, her own ability to mature into those the steps,
think-
or what exactly was needed. I mean, more input from myself probably would have helped somewhere, because I think at the beginning I was assessing her to be a lot like myself, where I was like,
well, and she is.
we're
That's
running around and wanting to like, I mean, I had half my paperwork from kindergarten, so behind a cabinet or something. So they found it at the end of the year, and there's like 300 pages of nothing that was written on them. So
I don't know how that happened, but
I don't know either. I got through. But it was, I don't know, with seeing Adri go through that same thing and knowing that it was better for her to be with you doing that stuff. Like I
Right.
knew it was beneficial because if she was in school in class, like those same papers would have been missed,
Right.
or at least I assumed that because of my own experience.
Yeah.
So I knew it would be beneficial for her to, have that
One-on-one.
one-on-one
Yeah.
and just get that education. And even if it was, I don't know, spoon fed at whatever level.
Well, and it was definitely hard for our relationship. I think ultimately, she had some growing up to do, but I think what really changed it was more so when I realized what was going on and I adjusted my expectations. I think, I had a very particular vision about what homeschool was supposed to look like and how we were going to do it and be successful. And it sort of had like all the to-do list checkbox things that if these weren't happening each and every day, like we didn't have a successful day.
Right.
And I internalized a lot of that. And then, in turn, like became very frustrated with Adri because I couldn't figure out where the disconnect was and where I was failing her or, not doing what she needed or meeting her needs. And it really, for me, wasn't until I started homeschooling Sai too. And it was such a silly thing of like, I really don't know if we should do this. Like, I don't know, like, because Saya was such a difficult baby and toddler that plus I was having a hard time with Adri that I did not think that adding him to the mix was going to be good. I thought it was
Right.
going to be a disaster.
Right.
And then once I did, I realized a big part of what I was struggling with was just the way Adri learns and the fact that I really wasn't embracing what I said I valued about homeschooling. What we said we valued about homeschooling, well, the whole reason we wanted to homeschool was because we wanted to do what was best for our kids and not try to fit, their unique, God-given, amazing personality into sort of the square peg of what traditional school in a classroom looks like. And we wanted to allow them the freedom to explore and learn and express themselves and have a one-on-one education. And yet, for whatever reason, I still was trying to put Adri into that box that I was saying I didn't want her to have to be a part of. And once I saw Sai and the way that Sai learned and how different that was from Adri with the same teacher, right? Me, I realized that I wasn't being fair to Adri, that I was putting a lot of unfair expectations on her and on me. And I had to do better,
Yeah.
and that was hard, it was hard to recognize, like, yes, obviously part of it was there was still some things that needed to change. Adri, there are still some things that we struggle with Adri. Adri is kind of a very average academic student. She does not have the desire to do schoolwork out of a book. That's just not
Right. No.
very
And-
much like
yeah.
the way that you are.
Right. No, I mean, that's
not
right.
something you
That's-
valued. It was like,
Right.
as long
No,
as
it
I'm
came-
sort of average, middle of the pack,
It came
passing, I'm good.
Later in life, like post high school, I was like, okay, now I'm done with all this formal education. Now I'll actually go do what I want to do and
Right.
learn the things I care
Right.
about. And then it was like a la carte, what do I want to pick? And here we
Right.
go. So then it was, now I can activate
Yeah.
these brain cells because I always knew I could do better,
Right.
but it was just like,
You had no
I'm being
motivation.
told to do better. So
Right.
like, I don't want to be told to do what I have to do.
Right.
I want to do what I want to do.
Right.
So
and that's very much the way Adri is.
Yeah.
And so I had to figure out how to work with her, with the way that she learns, the way that she wants to learn, the things that interest her, and actually embrace what it is that I said is really cool about homeschooling.
Right.
And so, so then really, the difference between Adri and Sai as far as the type of student they are is night and day. I mean, the way that I approach them, the way that we do school, the way that I teach them is like complete opposites, yin and yang, night and day, whatever you want to describe it as. That is the difference between Adri and Sai. And I had to adjust to get on board with that. Because that's the beauty of homeschooling, right? And so we've come a long way, right? We've come a long way in that. So Adri's going into third grade, Sai's going into first grade, and then we have Jay, who's going into second grade. And Jamie's journey in school has been very different as well. She did go to school, to public school for kindergarten and for first grade for, half the year until coronavirus craziness came, and then she came home.
It was like first case that I saw in like a school somewhere. It was like, I don't even know, Canton County or something. It was like, second grader has coronavirus. It's like, okay, Jay's not going to school because we have to protect Kenzie. So
we decided like the day before it was announced that Ohio schools were closing. So like she missed like the last 2 days of school before it closed.
Right. They were like, we're closing on Monday. We're like, okay, well, we're taking her out Thursday.
Keeping her, Thanks. So, so her, experience has kind of been varied. And then Jamie is on an IEP. She gets a lot of different services in school.
Some people probably don't know what IEP stands for. You should probably spell it out.
It's an individualized education plan. I figure those that know what an IEP is, it's relevant to them. But basically, she gets accommodations. She's not in a resource room all day, but she does get pulled for speech. She gets pulled for occupational therapy. She gets pulled for physical therapy. And she gets pulled during her class times, language arts and math. And has that in the room with the intervention specialist. Her reading is not academically on track with her peers, but part of that's because she can't talk, or she can't talk well. She can talk, I guess. I should clarify that, but she still has a really hard
much
time.
Improved. Yeah.
And so when she can't make certain letter sounds, it makes it really difficult to teach her how to read properly. When she struggles to find the right word in her brain even to talk, it means that sometimes things like sight words just get lost. If you think of like a grandpa that had a stroke, that's very much kind of the struggle that you see going on in Jay's head sometimes when she's working on like reading. Similarly, in math, actually, this past year, she's really caught up with her peers. The only area in math that she is well behind in is when it comes to like story problems and application. And again, a lot of that has to do with the fact that prepositions like of or from or flew away versus like, if you said like 2 ducks were on the pond and 1 flew away, how many ducks are there? She, is just as likely to get the right answer as to say 3, because thinking about that description of that is difficult for her in her head. So picking up on those little prepositional or descriptive cues in a story problem is difficult for her.
Right.
Yeah, so,
I remember some of the other things that were important for when we decided to do homeschooling was just like the ability that we would have flexibility for our schedule, and like I liked and appreciated the differences that we'd be able to do with that. Like even when we were, they started off doing gym classes during the day when all the other kids were at school, so it was like there was a limited number of kids.
Oh yeah.
And so they got more instruction time from the instructors. Yeah. Obviously, gym classes are all questionable at the moment.
Yeah.
But then there's chess that they were able to get signed up for, at least for Adrian and Sai, and we had planned to send Kenzie. Obviously, those things are all on hold until things get improved.
But I think
when we would drive down to chess, or when I take them to school, it was always like she said at the beginning, the one thing that we've always wanted to do was like have that closer education level. And so like I would ask them, what do you want to know about? What do you want to learn? And then like by that night when I head back from work and get back with them, I'd be like, oh, you asked about, what's the marshmallow named after or something? Right. And then I would tell them the answer that there was, some research that I did about it, because it was something they wanted to learn about. Right. So, it's just, like you said, we want to provide that individualized education.
And that flexibility, is something that we kind of became frustrated with being missing for Jay, and so this year our plan,
being annoyed going out to them waiting for the bus and like, okay, and then she'd not be on the bus the first day and you were like, oh, where'd she go?
So, but it meant that Jay academically is on track in some ways and not in other ways. And while for a time we felt like it was best for her to be getting those services in school, some of that is kind of transitioned. And so this year, our decision has been very different. This year, Jamie is technically enrolled in school, but she's doing 100% online through public school. And part of that obviously is because of just still having to be really cautious since Kenzie's still in treatment for leukemia.
Right.
But
This
then,
year, I mean, everything for homeschool is about safety and
Right,
just making
right.
sure we're staying
Cautious and-
as limited as we
Yeah.
can be. Obviously, with
Yeah.
my work role and your work once a month or whatever, it's got to be.
Once a month. I work more than that, but
Yeah, I mean, you work daily. I just mean going into the office.
yeah. So, but so for Jay, this year is kind of a great transition or stepping stone to decide, do we do homeschool the way we've done with the other kids in the future? Because I think that was always our goal. Or does she need a few more years in school getting the support services the way that they're provided in the school system? And so that's something that we kind of are learning and looking at.
Right.
But again, it kind of came down to what's best for each of our kids individually, and also what's best for them as they are a part of our family, because both of those roles and responsibilities are really important. It's important to think about what's best for them as a kid, as a unique human being with very specific needs, but then also what's their role in the family. I think, unfortunately, sometimes that role is really like forgotten about for kids.
Mm-hmm.
You have mom, dad, and kids, but each of our kids plays a very specific role in the dynamics of our family and our house. And it's important to consider those and how schooling is going to impact that. And so that's kind of the...
Well, and I say that's the nice thing about the homeschooling that's out there is that
Right.
we've tried in the past 5 years just the various amounts of different
Tons. I mean, we've done
curriculums,
5 or
So,
6 or 7 curriculums
Right,
because
like
I've
we
switched
did
things halfway through the year.
Sunlight, Bob Jones University,
Yeah.
Becca, which we're doing heavily this year.
Liberty Online
Liberty
University,
Online, right.
because I thought maybe that would help because I was messing something up for Adri.
Yeah. And then I think there was just some other stuff that was
We've done
recommended.
ACE.
Which I was hoping ACE was going to be the one that was the winner because it was like it would base it off of the kids' responses, and
yeah.
I was excited for it, but didn't work out.
We've done Alpha Omega. There's
But
lots. I mean, we've
like-
done tons of
and
different things.
I think that's the cool factor about homeschooling is that
Yeah.
we've been able to experience going through those different ones
Right.
versus like just going to the same. Here's Vandalia Middle School, and you
Right.
can just go there forever, and
Right.
they change the curriculum based on what their school board decides,
Right.
versus changing it based on what our kids getting well.
Yeah.
So I
And-
like it for that method, but
Yeah. And then this year we're starting with Kenzie, which is going to be a whole different thing. I think she's going to give me challenges that I never expected. So stay tuned for hearing all about
Oh, yeah. I
schooling
was gonna say,
Kenzie.
you're
I think
welcome
that's
to
going to be a whole different ball of wax because she's got a lot of personality.
between
In case you haven't
Kenzie and
guessed.
Jay, we should have lots of fun things to talk about.
Holy cow.
We'll probably just do a special extra series about whatever they come
Kenzie's-
up with.
Yeah. So Kenzie's going to be starting K4. And Kenzie's smart, man, but she is probably the most strong-willed kid that we have.
Yeah. It's
By
gonna
a
be-
long shot.
it's
By
gonna
a
be
long shot. Obi might have her beat as he ages. I don't know how that's going to go. But at this moment, definitely Kenzie's the strong-willed child.
Hopefully, at that point, Adri can be training the littler ones.
Yeah,
Like, here's the
yeah.
alphabet.
So it'll be interesting. But we've gone through a lot. We've learned a lot. But at the end of the day, in spite of that all, we really love homeschooling.
Right.
We love the benefit that it's been to our family for the academics, for the flexibility, for our family togetherness, for the ability to travel. Or, this last year, I would take the kids with me to Kenzie's appointments and we would do school in the hospital. And that was a huge blessing as well. The biggest stress was when to get
Oh,
Jay,
right.
who was going to get Jay on the bus so that I could be where I needed
Right.
to be.
Yeah. I was gonna say the biggest stress for the last 2 years with doing Kenzie's stuff was
Yeah.
somebody needed to be here to get Jay off the bus so we could go
Right.
back down and be there for our 4 days of chemo and
Right.
whatever, and take her to grandma's house or whatever
Right.
was happening with transitioning childcare.
Right.
And that was it was stressful because it was like, well, you can't leave until 4:30 because that's when the bus comes. And,
Right. And so homeschool in that regard too has been so valuable to us and to our experience, and has allowed our kids to do really cool things, whether that be gymnastics like you mentioned, or martial arts, or some of the hybrid schooling things that we've done. There's so many opportunities and experiences that our kids have had the opportunity to do because we chose homeschooling that we're really excited about. So we're going to kind of spend the next who knows how long talking about homeschooling, talking about, I think for a while we're going to focus on some of the specific myths, things like homeschooling kids are weird, which I have very strong opinions about, and some of that. Some of those different myths, because there's a lot of myths and misconceptions. And then also just talking about some of the struggles that moms have, because obviously, as I shared, that was something that I dealt with for years before I really kind of feel like I hit my stride and figured it out. And I guarantee you're going to hear more in the upcoming year about the stresses and struggles, because there's always something new, because our kids are always learning and changing and growing.
Yeah, as well as a dad that tries to take one day a week to help out with homeschool. So be looking forward to my struggle and stress as well, as I try to figure out what mom has created for education for them.
Yeah, so Josh is going to be more involved this year, which will be interesting.
I'm excited to just be like, hey, what's your question? What do you want to know about? And then find, like I said, research that topic and give them an answer. But there's definitely going to be lots more to come about homeschooling. So make sure you like, subscribe, follow, and we will catch you on the next adventure. Bye.